Today on Growing Idaho, you have a lot of thoughts on housing, what you can afford and what you should be able to afford. It all started actually with this. Our own Maggie O'Mara shared a post from Idaho Today contributor April Neal. She posted about a recent report from realtor.com that showed the median income needed to buy a 3-bedroom home in each state. Now, this assumed a 6.65% interest rate, 10% down, taxes, insurance, and, this is important, a 30% income to housing cost limit. Idaho ranked 10th highest on this list with a median household income of $163,000 to afford a 3-bedroom. Idaho's neighbors all over this top 10 list as well. Utah at number 7, Washington 6, Montana at 5th highest. California checks in at 3rd overall. Hawaii is 1st, not surprisingly. Now, you all had something to say about this. At last check, Maggie's post had more than 1,000 comments and counting. Time to move into 208 mode and address some of them. First, Andrew replied to the story saying, quote, "Definitely don't need $163,000 to buy a 3-bedroom house in Idaho. You can easily buy a 3-bedroom home in the Treasure Valley, one of the most expensive areas, for $300,000 to $350,000. Now, this is true if you remember that the Treasure Valley extends into the Fruitland area, even into Ontario, Oregon, and there are 3-bedroom homes in those areas for even less, about $200,000 to $300,000. However, they're almost all fixer-uppers, and there are few to none that I could find in Ada County. Also, don't forget, these are median numbers from Realtor.com all across Idaho, not just for the Treasure Valley. Also, just to make sure everyone knows, median numbers are where you stack the numbers from the biggest to the smallest, and then you take the middle one. So not quite an average, but sort of that same idea. Brian commented, quote, "False. We make 50% less than $163,000 and got a home at 27 years old. Take responsibility and accountability." And then a lot of people agreed with Brian, but some others asked the question, when did you buy that house, Brian, making just $80,000? And first off, Brian, good for you. Congratulations. But I also bought a house making much less than $163,000. It was 20 years ago when things were much more affordable. We also don't know how expensive the home was, just as Brian said, that it was in fact a home. Which also brings us to Kara, who says, quote, "Not true. I make $80,000 a year and bought a $460,000 house in Montana by myself." First off, hey, Maggie O'Mara has fans in Montana. Congratulations to her. Also, the numbers we're talking about are from Idaho, and while Realtor.com says even more is required in Montana to afford a 3-bedroom, there are a lot of unanswered questions about Kara's situation, just like Brian's situation. How much money did you put down? And what was the interest rate when you bought that place? Also, what are your other bills? Those are going to play a big role in whether the lender thinks you can afford that monthly payment. And again, we're talking about median numbers, so no single situation is going to mirror this perfectly, which is why we see comments like this from Joseph, who says, quote, "Yeah, this is wrong. You need to double those income numbers." Again, this is how we come up with the median numbers. Brian and Kara say you don't need nearly that income. Joseph says you need double that income. In the middle somewhere is the median and the truth. Also, lenders, again, want your housing cost at just 30% of your income. So you can spend a lot more on your housing if you want, but they're much less likely to lend to you if your housing costs are above that, which is what the original post said. Finally, Cassandra said, quote, "I personally don't know anyone who makes over $100,000. It's absolutely insane." This makes sense, Cassandra. First, you're most likely to be around people in a similar financial situation as you. And also, this just illustrates why we're in a housing crisis, because a lot of people don't know anyone making $100,000. Realtor.com says you need to be making $163,000 to afford the median Idaho 3-bedroom home. And the median household income in Idaho, what people actually make, is half that, below 80. Woof. Coming up,